Hey, it's Norm from Tested.com. I'm here right in Atlanta, Georgia for Dragon Con, but right now I'm in Harrison Krix's workshop, Volpin Props. Thank you for inviting us here. If you don't know, Harrison is a prop maker, self-employed.
Yep.
You quit your job
Yes.
to do this full-time, and you've made amazing props over the years that you might have seen on the internet. So
Such flattery.
we want you to show off for people who don't know who you are, some of the props you've made.
Sure.
You've made a ton of stuff for clients, for video game companies,
Yeah.
for private collectors. So a lot of that stuff actually is already shipped out, right?
Yes, that's the unfortunate part about doing this for a living is I don't get to keep any of these things. I make these really neat things and bring the stuff in the world, and I spend all this time working on it, and then I get about a day or two to photograph it, and it goes right off to whoever paid for it.
Right. But this is your personal collection.
These are bits from my personal, well, all but this guy here, because you guys own that.
And
but
there's a whole separate video for that.
it's still in my house for now. But these three are my personal collection.
Yeah, let's talk about the portal gun.
Sure.
Because that was one of the first ones you did.
It was, yes. The first couple things I did were some pieces from Zelda, and there was just costume stuff, But this was the first replica, I guess, air quotes, that you could say that I attempted to build. And I didn't know anything. This is terrible as far as the techniques involved. This is mostly PVC. This back panel, this back piece here, I'll go ahead and lift it up, is actually, it's green florist's foam, and it's wrapped in this horrible plastic material that has this sort of duct tape texture to it. And so I wrapped it around with my hands, and then it's all covered in Bondo here and there and sanded, and it took so long just to get it even close to smooth. And then all the textures coming back through again after the years. I didn't know anything about electronics when I did this, but it does change colors. So it's got blue and orange. Every wire in this is the same color. So for every LED, for every connection, for the battery, for the power, for the switch, it's all gray. So if you have to take this open to do any maintenance, it's impossible to figure anything out. But I learned a lot from this. And from this, I was able to do a little bit more complicated projects.
Right. And this thing, I mean, you said you learned a lot. You learned to build this.
Yes.
Right. It wasn't like you went to school and learned prop making and then decided to build this.
Correct.
But you learned prop making so you could turn something that didn't exist into reality. Like this is before NECA did their own plastic versions that you can buy anywhere now, and because you wanted a portal gun.
Yes.
Where did you learn the skills to build this from scratch without any background experience?
It's kind of an amalgamation. I grew up working on cars. I was a mechanic. I paid my way through school doing car audio and doing mechanic work. And I also worked in a body shop for a little while. So, grafting front ends onto cars and doing headlight conversions and custom work like that, which was neat. And it taught me how to use Bondo, and it taught me how to weld. And when I was in college, I actually did a minor in furniture design. So that taught me how to use stuff like, chop saws and bandsaws and scroll saws and, simple tools like that. So when this came around, I kind of had an idea of, well, I can use PVC pipe for the barrel, and I can slather the back in Bondo, and I can figure out the geometry of the technique that I need to do. So I didn't know the materials, and I didn't know the paint, and I didn't know the chemicals, but I knew enough about the process of layering and stacking, because I built a coffee table before, and that's just a series of shapes that are all amalgamated until you have a table. So I figured I'd just layer shapes until I had a portal gun. And so that taught me more about the materials, a little bit about the technique, but more about the materials, and use this for prop making, don't use that, these are good for that application, this isn't.
And then after you did the portal gun, you worked on this, which is a hugely ambitious project.
Well, this is the second one. The first one I did was actually the Guy Manuel helmet, which is the gold one. And I bless this guy who came to me, because I had this client, and I built the portal gun, and I got this email, and this guy's like, I want this Daft Punk helmet with all the lights in it, and chrome, and this visor, can you make it? And I don't know where in his mind he came up with the idea that I could, or where in my mind they came up with the idea that I could, but I was like, yes, I can. And a year and a half later, I got it to him. But it had all the LEDs, and it had all the chrome, and it had all this animation. It was a really cool piece, and he loved it. And that was another big sort of stepping stone for me. It taught me a lot about electronics. I taught myself how to design my own circuit boards. I taught myself how to solder surface mount components. I learned a little bit about Arduino. Not a lot, but a little. A lot of my commissions are like that. The thing I built for you guys recently taught me a lot about casting clear resin. Every project I take on is another step for me to learn a new process.
And then here, this thing is actually chromed.
Yep.
And the visor, it's programmable.
Yes. So you can. There's a little toggle switch back here. When I wear this, there's a battery pack that goes behind me, and this button right here cycles through various animations. And these are all programmed in Arduino. And the neat thing, and what I love about tossing some of my stuff out there is I've made a lot of this available now. So I sell the circuit board kits for these online. So if somebody wants to make their own Daft Punk helmet, they buy all the kits. I give them a PDF that says, buy all these components for it, and you can make your own thing. And I got a message on Twitter from this guy recently. He's like, hey, I bought your kit, and I got the things working. And it was really cool, but I thought I could do something a little bit cooler with it. So I integrated a Bluetooth device, so now you can send messages on your iPhone straight to the screen and draw patterns and everything. So mine are all pre-programmed. You turn this on and it does a thing, but there's only 10 things in there. His infinitely programmable. You can do all this stuff, and it's just another step from my work, which I love. I think that's really cool.
And then as you were building stuff for private clients, you also got the notice of video game companies.
Yes.
And you started making video game props, official video game props almost, and that's what this is.
Yes, and I gotta tell you, working with video game companies and working from video games is great because these guys, well, they're fans, first and foremost, of the things they make. And so when they see other fans making things from their games, it's not like I don't want to say like a Lucas thing, but it's it's not like a Disney or a Star Wars where they're like, stop doing that, that's our intellectual property. Gaming companies are like, that's cool, can we have one? And so I started getting commission requests from video game companies. This is from Mass Effect 3. So BioWare and EA actually got in touch with me after I made a different gun from Mass Effect, and they said, we'd like you to make this. Here's super confidential artwork 6 months before the game release. We need this for San Diego Comic-Con.
And this rifle from Mass Effect 3, this is your personal one, but you can actually see your work in, for example, the Mass Effect 3 live commercial.
Yeah, there was a live action commercial called Take Earth Back, and I made 4 of these rifles for that shoot that they had in Prague, which was really cool. For the shoot though, this is hollow resin because it's a costuming piece. We want it to be lightweight, carry around. Theirs are all solid, so theirs are like 15 pounds a piece, but they're really neat.
Very cool. Well, you did something incredibly admirable. You quit your job to do this full time, and you built out this whole workshop. So could you show us some of the tools you use?
Yeah.
Get some people some inspiration on what they can do to build up their own workshop?
Well, when I first started off, when I made the portal gun, I had a Dremel tool, I had a palm sander, like a little orbital guy, and I think that's it pretty much. Hacksaws and screwdrivers and all the stuff that a garage mechanic would have, but I didn't have big tools. I didn't have a vacuum forming machine or anything like that. So you can make stuff like this without a full shop. There's a friend of mine who has a philosophy that I really like, and that's any tool that gets more and more complex and more specialized just enables you to do something faster and more accurately. But you can do all those things without those tools. It'll just take you a little bit longer, and you have to be better and more precise in order to get that fidelity out of it. So I started off small, I built up and built up and built up, and I am where I am today. This is my scroll saw. This is a really, really great DeWalt scroll saw. This is like one of the most expensive scroll saws I've found, but all the reviews are fantastic, and I love it because it's enormous in the depth here, right? So you can cut out these giant, very complicated shapes with a super fine blade. So when you're doing stuff that has a lot of, for instance, when I did the needler, all those little ribs that sit in between there with all these intricate cutouts, you can do very tight radius curves and make very accurate cuts with this. So that's this guy. I'm a big fan of this. There's my lathe. My lathe is a Shopfox model. Again, I had a little Harbor Freight guy for a while that I beat the nonsense out of. I also name all my tools. I don't know if anybody else does that sort of stuff, but all my tools have names. Some of them are really dumb, some of them are fun. This is one of my other favorite tools. This is my bandsaw, a 14-inch Shopfox. It's kind of a mid-level guy, but I use this for everything. I actually have an assistant who comes and works with me every now and again, and she makes the joke that I would trim my toenails on this if I could get my foot on top of it. I love my bandsaw. This is my most used tool, and I take very good care of it. I actually just did a full maintenance on it. This is Mega Made. As named by my Facebook page, I took a little poll and people voted that I should name my vacuum former Mega Made. And vacuum formers are, we were talking about this earlier, they're kind of a rite of passage for prop makers. At some point in time, you're gonna need a thin plastic something, and you're gonna make a vacuum forming machine. And for a lot of people, that's going to be like a toaster oven, right, and a little tiny thing.
Yeah,
and then
do it on real cheap and real fast.
do it super cheap. In fact, I've got another one that I built 2 other machines before this. The very, 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 very first one was just a little thing about this big, right? 2 pieces of MDF with a bunch of holes drilled in it that I hooked on my shop vac. And I bought a toaster oven at the thrift store, and so I'd heat up a little tiny piece of plastic and go thump. And so I was able to make these little bits. And eventually I needed something bigger. So this was vacuum former version 2. And this was made from my parents' old telephone table in their kitchen. When they moved, they were just gonna throw it away. That's why it's got these weird little leaves on the side. These are drawer rails for like kitchen drawers. And so this thing just goes up and down like that. So there's a little bit more guidance than the last one. And you know, you raise the plastic up and it just friction holds it on there.
Just friction?
Yeah, just friction. And that was a complete accident, but it happened that the wheels just kind of popped out of these at the top. So it holds it in place. And then those guys right there, heating elements out of a toaster oven. And then you just take this and plunk it down, turn on the shop vac, and away you go.
You got trays and everything.
Yeah, I used to hold up molds and stuff there. And I wired it up so that this is the power for the heater and, you know, my very professional switch covers. You know, it's stuff I built out of scraps, and it worked incredibly well for a long time. It's again, I still use this if I have small things I need to make. And then I needed to pull really big stuff. So that's where Megamade came from. Megamade can do ABS, styrene, acrylic, and PET, whereas on all my other machines I could only do styrene. And I can do 24 by 24, my usable area about 21 inches of plastic. So I can make, you know, armor, and I'm gonna do a test pull for you guys here in a minute.
Yeah.
A masked piece that I did.
And designs for this were just online.
Yeah, there's a guy who has a website called build-stuff.com, and he's got a bunch of plans. And the neat thing about this design is it's scalable, right? So if you wanna make this is a 2x2, and if you wanna make a 2x3 or a 2x4 or a 4x4, you know, all of it is just, well, you buy twice or 3 or 5 times or whatever the number of materials you would get for this. My design is slightly modified from what he did, mostly because of the lack of space. So I had to compact his illustrations and his design a bit. And I also cheaped out a little bit. I've got red oak for the lifting arms, whereas he, you know, specified box steel. And I'm like, I'm already so much money into this thing.
But it looks nice.
It's like my grandmother's old furniture. It's something you can hand down to your children. This is an UltraCal, which is basically a sort of gypsum concrete buck of a bird splicer mask from BioShock, the original BioShock 1 and 2. So this is just the front part of it. There's also a little beak piece that goes off of it, but I'll be pulling that in just a second. So, get our vacuum going. Well, right now, the noise you're hearing is the vacuum pump evacuating air from that big yellow tank down there. And that is going to, you read on this little dial, show you in inches of mercury how much vacuum is being drawn out, right? So I think, I'm not really a scientist, but I think 30 inches of mercury is absolute vacuum, so that would be space. So this will get it down to, you know, right around 25, which is good enough for us. This big switch with the safety catch on it turns on the heating element. That is going to heat up the plastic, and when it reaches a certain level of sag, we'll be able to drop the plastic down. It'll stretch over these two forms, and then you pull all the air out through these little holes by dumping this valve, right? So the vacuum in the tank gets evacuated from here, pulls the plastic down around these parts, and as the plastic cools, it sets into its shape. All right, so you see the plastic kind of starts sagging down here?
Yep.
As it gets hotter and hotter. And that's one of those things, you know, like fine wine or aged cheese, you just have to get a feel for to where the proper amount is for any given mold or any given buck. For this one, since I've got a lot more draw, it's going to be a little bit more drag or a little bit more droop to it. But if you get it wrong, you get a lot of webbing. We'll see if I can avoid that. Not bad. Okay, this right here is called webbing, right? This happens on almost all of my pulls right here, but it's not a bad thing because this section and this section gets cut off. And I'm running the tank or the pump again because in order to get these little parts around the eyes, it has to pull just a bit more air out because these kind of get blocked off. Oh, nice. Yeah, usually, sometimes I get a lot of webbing up in this area right here, but that turned out pretty good. Okay. And I'll do the cooking show thing and pull one out that I've prepared earlier. So once you pop it loose from all the UltraCal, you get this guy.
Very cool. It's like a plastic mask you'd buy for Halloween.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, if you really want to be very creepy for Halloween.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's it. You have the vacuum former. I know you have a laser cutter in your office.
I have a laser cutter, yes.
You have an assortment of tools, and you just built this out in your garage.
Yep.
This is something you don't need all this to
No,
start with.
this is a little killer, and you know, I do this as a full-time job, so I need a little bit more.
Right.
You know, I need a little bit more space. I'm actually going to be moving into a full shop a little bit later on this year. But you know, I have the same sort of flotsam that you get when you start accumulating the rows of bolts and nuts and screws and various cans of paint and everything. But this is a very addictive hobby, and it's like you buy a bandsaw, you want a bigger one. You make a vacuum former, you want a bigger one. And eventually you fill your garage up with tools and your wife's mad at you because you can't park her car in here anymore.
Well, thank you for inviting us into your workshop. I know people can find more of your work on your Facebook page and on your website, volpinprops.com.
Volpinprops.com, facebook.com/volpinprops. Pretty much any social media thing you add a Volpin Props after it, it's me. Except Tumblr. I don't have a Tumblr, but whatever.
And we look forward to seeing what else you'll be making in the future, in the coming years. People can buy some stuff you sell on your website, and you even take commissions from time to time.
I do. I can only make about 10 or 12 a year because they're very complicated pieces, but I do take commissions. So I love custom work, and if you're interested, I have a form on my website you can fill out.
Awesome. And for more awesome projects from people like Harrison, go to Tested.com, subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Norm, here in Atlanta for DragonCon. We'll see you guys next time.